Okay, so we've reached 8:30 in the evening, at least in the UK, but good morning to our Southern Hemisphere participants. Just want to thank you all for joining tonight, as is the normal case. Everyone is muted for now. If you wish to ask a question, then you can type it in the chat window, or if you go to the participant window and use the little raise hand button, then when we come to the end, and I'm sure Gary Haines will be happy to answer any questions that you have. We really are, this is fantastic this evening that we've got a representative of the RAF Museum presenting to us, and it shows just how far this little initial idea has come. And I have to thank Mike Smith, who came on board and to assist me with determining speakers and presenters for this. A couple of months ago, it's Mike that made the initial contact. So I might have set the thing up initially, but it's Mike that should get all the credit for this tonight. But Gary, I put a little bit on the promo of his background. He's sort of written for various magazines, written a couple of books about your home in the East End of London. Mm-hmm. You've got a particular interest in sort of the Battle of Britain era. So wealth of knowledge, and it will also show the various resources that the RAF Museum have to help us as scale aeromodelers. But without stealing any more of your thunder, I'll pass over to Gary. Thank you very much for agreeing to this.
Thank you, Graham, and it's a pleasure to do it today. I'll just share my screen for you. I hope everybody can see that. Yep, perfect. That's what I wanted, a thumbs up. Well, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity today to talk about the archives of the RAF Museum. I begin with a quick overview of the history of the museum and then discuss some of my favourite objects in the collection, and finish with talking about some of the research resources we hold, which I think might be of particular interest to you. Now, to prepare for this, I've had a great excuse to look at some of your YouTube videos and get workshop envy, basically. You've done some fantastic, you've all got some brilliant workshops, and I certainly want one as well. In talking of workshops, let me just see if I can share my screen. This is my one. This is the museum, the RAF Museum's archive. The RAF Museum Archive holds some 650,000 plus archive items in the collection. It's the biggest collection in the museum itself. And my colleague, Gordon Leif, actually holds this. This is the printed matter, and he's in charge of the library. And that contains some 19,000 books, some 70,000 manuals, 8,000 periodicals, 13,000 maps, and some 30,000 air diagrams. They're just some rough figures. As you can imagine, it's a pretty big collection that we've got. Some of our most consulted items in the library are the air publications. These are produced by the Air Ministry, and from 1964, the Ministry of Defence. These included Air Force lists, pilots' handbooks, and technical instructions for aircraft and the equipment itself. We actively seek new acquisitions relating to the history of the Royal Air Force and the people that served in it. Not just the pilots, but everybody involved in the RAF and the memories of those who knew them. Now, in normal times, this is where you can come and access the material via appointment. We have a small but perfectly formed reading room, and we're always happy to help with any requests when you arrive. At the end of my talk, I will give my contact details and those of the archive, library and research team. Please do contact us if you have any inquiries. We are offering a limited inquiry service at the moment because obviously for most of us, we're working from home. Now, the museum is one organisation that is spread across 3 sites: RAF Museum London, RAF Museum Cosford, and the non-public site at Stafford, which is our stores. Now, I'm actually based here. This is the RAF Museum Hendon. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this building, and access to the archive collection is held by the museum and is available to everybody. Now, the history of the museum itself and the site is very much integral with the history of the Royal Air Force and aviation history. Now, the museum was officially opened to the public in November 1972 by the Queen at Hendon. And here we have a couple of tube map posters. The history of aviation and Hendon goes back much further, of course. The site of the RAF Museum at Hendon was once a civil aviation site and also an RAF station. In 1909, a local company, Everett and Edgecombe, built an aeroplane. To accommodate it, they built a shed in a field at the end of Colindale Avenue. By October 1910, a large area had been cleared and other organisations were using the airfield, including a school founded by Louis Blériot. In 1911, Claude Graham-White, you can see here on this slide, and the biplane is actually Graham-White landing at Hendon, bought the land and promoted the site as the London Aerodrome. Air displays and races were held on most weekends, bringing the new technology to the attention of the wider public. The first aerial derby was held here in 1912, and this race around London started and finished it at Hendon and was watched by an astonishing 500,000 people. Now, Claude Graham-White's factory was based at Hendon and it grew rapidly during the First World War. Orders were received from the Admiralty and the War Office for aircraft. In addition, many pilots were trained at Hendon for both the Royal Naval Air Service and the Royal Flying Corps. One of those who's trained were Albert Ball, and along with Mannock and Warnford, they were all trained at Hendon and all later won Victoria Crosses for their bravery. Although there was little military activity in peacetime, the government refused to return the airfield to Graham-White. In 1922, the government took possession of Hendon without warning and closed the factory which had survived post First World War by making cars. In 1925, ownership of Hendon passed to the Royal Air Force. In 1920, the RAF Pageant was held at Hendon, and here's one of the posters from the archive, and it was the first of many held here during the 20s and 30s. For most people, it was their only chance to see the skills of the RAF pilots. Mock bombing runs, hinted here in this poster, would be one attraction that took place to thrill the crowds. And here's another image of the pageant in operation. Hundreds of thousands of people visited the displays. In 1938 and 39, the displays were titled the Empire Air Day, one of several held across the United Kingdom. And here we have a lovely image of some Hawker Harts lined up at Hendon. Number 600 and 601 squadrons of the Auxiliary Air Force were formed at Hendon in 1927. In 1930, number 604 squadron was formed. After 1930, the Prince of Wales and the Duke of York kept their aircraft at Hendon, and this was the beginning of what's now known as the Queen's Flight. During the Battle of Britain, a number of fighter squadrons used the airfield for short periods. The proximity to various headquarters and good access to road and rail links led to the Royal Air Force and the United States Army Air Forces to concentrate transport units at Hendon. And of course, it was a target from 1940 onwards, and it was bombed on numerous occasions. It became well known to royalty, politicians and military commanders who were used to flying from here to and from the airfields. Now, 1968 saw the 50th anniversary of the formation of the Royal Air Force, and a small display was held to celebrate the occasion, and what we have here is a copy of the souvenir booklet. Most of the airfield site was sold for housing, but Hendon remained a busy Royal Air Force station, accommodating a supply control centre and the Joint Services Air Trooping Centre. The RAF Museum began inquiring objects in 1965. It had a store at RAF Henlow, but needed a more suitable location. It was allocated to two remaining Auxiliary Air Force hangars near the railway. Once construction was completed, aircraft was moved to Hendon. Gallery displays were produced with the help of the resident exhibition design and display unit of the Royal Air Force. The museum was officially opened, as I mentioned, by the Queen on the 15th of November 1972. Now, the origins of the museum are more complicated than time allows, and I would certainly recommend looking at an article by Peter Elliott in the latest Royal Air Force Historical Society journal to read about all the intrigues and ideas and setting up of the museum. You'd be surprised how intriguing and the machinations that went on about setting up an Air Force museum. Now, expansion of the museum itself took place in 1978 with the opening of the Battle of Britain Museum, and again in 1983 with the opening of the Bomber Command Museum. The museum has undergone recent work in line with the centenary of the Royal Air Force. This includes a new RAF Stories, the first 100 years display, the First World War in the Air exhibition, and the RAF in an Age of Uncertainty, which looks at the recent history of the Royal Air Force. Now, I'll briefly mention our sister site at Crosswood, which also has a history intimately connected with the history of the Royal Air Force. The rapid expansion of the RAF in the 1930s required additional aircrew and technicians. Crosswood was chosen as the site for a new school of technical training in the 1930s. The first trainees arrived at Crosswood in August 1938. Civilian instructors trained armourers, radar technicians, engine and airframe fitters throughout the war, and the trainees included people from France, Poland, Czechoslovakia and Romania. The Air Transport Auxiliary played a vital role in ferrying aircraft away from Crosswood to their operational units. Number 12 ferry pilots pool, based at Crosswood, was one of only 2 such pools that was staffed entirely by women. The Aerospace Museum at Crosswood was opened on the 1st of May 1979 and was born out of a collection of historical ground instructional airframes. These were inventory from the Royal Air Force at Crosswood. Other aircraft were added to the collection from the RAF's reserve collections of historical aircraft, which were scattered across the country. The trustees of the Royal Air Force Museum took over the management of the collection. Now, following appeals, an art gallery, a temporary exhibitions gallery, and 2 other subject galleries were built, and a new project was opened by His Royal Highness the Duke of Gloucester on the 21st of June 1998. On the 13th of May 2002, Marshal of the Royal Air Force Sir Michael Betham opened a new conservation centre, which was named after him. The National Cold War exhibition at Crosswood was opened by Her Royal Highness Princess Anne on the 7th of February 2007. The exhibition is housed in the landmark building, which you can see here, and its unique design has resulted in many awards. The exhibition holds 19 aircraft, tanks, vehicles, models, and memorabilia. A number of aircraft are suspended in flying attitudes, and this is the only place in the UK where you can view the wonderful Vulcan, Victor, and Valiant all together in one place. We also have a store at Stafford, which I mentioned, and this is not open to the public, but these few photographs give you a glimpse into the material that is there. Now, this is the clothing store containing surplus uniforms, and this is the main store, part of the main store. It gives you an idea of the variety of material that we have, from engines to vehicles to crates to everything in between. And we currently have some 50,000 accessioned items in the stores, plenty to choose from for future exhibitions. Now, that's a brief history of the museums, and now I thought I'd discuss some of my favourite items in the collection. Now, I began in my role in September 2019, and within my first week, I was shown this logbook by the Archive Library and Research Manager, Nina Hadaway. Now, you may be able to make out the name on the front of this logbook, and this belonged to Group Captain Sir Douglas Barder. And here we have some inside pages. What struck me when looking at this book was the page with a note in Barder's handwriting, which you should be able to read here, underlined for emphasis and reflecting RAF slang of the time. It read simply, "McKnight killed strafing Huns." This note accompanied an entry for the 12th of January 1941, with Flight Lieutenant Turney raided E-boats off Dunkirk, shot them up. I looked into this as I was really intrigued as to who McKnight was, and obviously it affected Barder because he's noted it and underlined it. Oops, I've missed it. See if I can go back. Here we go. Here we have Barder with McKnight on the far right, looking at a cartoon on Barder's Hurricane. This was on most aircraft the number 242 Squadron, known as the Canadian Squadron. Flying Officer William Lidstone McKnight, DFC, was born in Edmonton, Canada, on the 18th of November 1918, and during his service he saw action over Dunkirk in 1940. He was awarded a DFC and took part in the Battle of Britain with 6 confirmed victories, for which a bar was added to his DFC. By the time of his death, McKnight had achieved a total of 17 confirmed victories. Looking further into him, I also discovered that he was someone very much admired by Bardo, was actually his wingman at times, and an important member of his squadron. It's recorded that McKnight, when he was killed, was taking part in one of the first rhubarb sorties. These were attacks carried out at low level, usually by a pair of fighter planes, usually in bad weather over enemy territory, to harass and disrupt the enemy. The low-level flying and bad weather were designed to offset the danger of enemy fighters. However, these operational conditions made rhubarb missions even more hazardous. Rhubarbs were actually the RAF on the offensive. Every operation before that had been on the defensive, including, for instance, the Battle of Britain. These operations I actually continue to investigate, and so far confirming that some 154 pilots were killed undertaking rhubarbs. I have a forthcoming talk coming up on the museum on the 25th of June, hopefully from the museum itself, but will be broadcast online also. This will be about rhubarbs. And all this coming about purely based on one underlined note in a logbook, very much activating the archive. It should be noted that when killed, McKnight was 22 years old. The next item we have is an illustration on a letter by an 8-year-old and shows an image of his version of a crashed airship, the SL-11. This come down in Potter's Bar on the 3rd of September 1916 during the First World War. In the drawing is captured the relief and joy that the shooting down of this Zepp, as all airships were commonly known as Zeppelins, no matter who made them, caused across the country. The awe of an 8-year-old in the sense of adventure, danger, of fear of airships is also present in this little simple sketch. Now, fear had been instilled in the British public since January 1915. And here we have a postal insurance image. Now, London, east of the Tower of London, was approved as a legitimate target by the Kaiser on the 5th of May 1915. On the night of the 31st of May to the 1st of June 1915, a dark moonless night, the first London-focused raid took place by airships. Bombs fell from Stoke Newington to not millions of miles away from me, Stepney, and caused 41 fires. This was due to the incendiary bombs that were dropped. The police recorded 91 incendiary devices, 28 explosive devices, and 2 grenades dropped. Now, Zeppelin bombings caused outrage, and there seemed to be no way to combat these giants of the skies. An airship, some 157 meters in length, had dropped bombs over London for 20 minutes and then returned home without anybody getting anywhere near it. None of the airships carried navigation or bomb aiming equipment accurate enough to ensure civilian targets were not hit, so this was pretty much inevitable. The victims of this London bombing were 7 killed and 35 injured. One of those dead was a 3-year-old girl called Elsie Leggett, and this earned the Zepps another title, Baby Killers. Many newspapers decided to offer free insurance against Zepp bombardment as a way basically to sell their papers, and this advert comes from the Daily Chronicle. Bombing was so new that public warning posters were issued from 1915, illustrated with diagrams of both British and German airships and aircraft, and the text read as follows. Public warning. The public are advised to familiarise themselves with the appearance of British and German airships and aeroplanes so that they may not be alarmed by British aircraft and may take shelter if German aircraft appear. Should hostile aircraft be seen, take shelter immediately in the nearest available house, preferably in the basement, and remain there until the aircraft have left the vicinity. Do not stand about in crowds and do not touch unexploded bombs. That gives you an idea of the novelty of this type of warfare. And I really would like to know how practical it was to knock at the nearest door and say, can I come into your basement, please? I'm not sure that would have worked. Now, Second Lieutenant Leif Robinson, seen on the left of this slide, of the Royal Flying Corps, was responsible for shooting down a German airship. And it is this incident that the letter and illustration by the 8-year-old boy refers to. Flying a Royal Aircraft Factory BE-2C fighter armed with incendiary bullets, he was the first person to shoot down an airship over Britain. He was awarded the Victoria Cross and become an instant celebrity. Something he did not like. He wrote to his parents on the 22nd of October 1916, saying, "As I dare say you have seen in the papers, babies, flowers and hats have been named after me. Also, poems and prose have been dedicated to me. Oh, it's too much." Leif Robinson went back to active service as soon as he could. Captured in March 1917, he was treated badly as a prisoner of war due to his fame and would succumb to the flu pandemic soon afterwards, when he was released, dying on New Year's Eve 1918. He was not, however, the first person to shoot down a German airship, which is a common belief. This was Flight Sub-Lieutenant R.A.J. Walford, the Royal Naval Air Service, who was responsible for shooting down the first airship in the air over Belgium in June 1915. He was awarded a Victoria Cross, but sadly died taking part in an air display demonstrating a Farman biplane 10 days later. He was the same age as Robinson on his death, 23. Very much forgotten, his impressive grave can be found at Brompton Cemetery, which I visited in February last year, and is certainly worth a visit if ever you're that way in London. Now, meeting people and discussing acquisitions is one of the great parts of my job. Sadly curtailed at the moment, but hopefully we get back to normal as soon as we can. Now, this is Evelyn Richards, née Hudson, when I met her son John, who was donating her papers, described her as Hawaii's Amelia Earhart. Here in one image, she's looking ridiculously glamorous in a full body cast after surviving being thrown through Wellington bombers' fuselage in 1943, when serving with the Air Transport Auxiliary. At the age of 21 in 1930, Evelyn and her sister Winifred, aged 23, relocated to Hawaii from Canada. She took part in swimming events with Buster Crabbe, he of Flash Gordon fame, and in November 1931, she became the first woman to be granted a private pilot's license. This was in Hawaii, and then she undertook commercial flying trips, and in 1935 gained a transport pilot's license, again the first woman in Hawaii to do so. She then located in July to Los Angeles, and it was here she would take part in air derbies, stamina flying, and at one point continuously flying for 19 hours, 57 minutes, picking up fuel via special machinery while moving cars and making repairs to her aircraft while it was in the air. She also undertook high altitude flying, and in 1939, she reached a height of 18,000 feet in a Security NC 18967. Evelyn was a woman of adventure and joined the Air Transport Auxiliary in 1942. In this role, she would fly Hurricanes, Spitfires, Wellingtons, and Beaufighters. Sadly, the accident that she had would end her flying career. The Wellington she was hitching a lift back on suffered an engine failure during takeoff. This resulted in the plane crashing into power lines at the end of the runway, and Evelyn would be thrown through the fuselage. Her son John recalled that his mum had said that her most vivid memory of the crash was thinking about the way the Wellington's fuselage was constructed as she was being projected through it. Evelyn would spend 6 months in a full body cast in hospital. Her story reminds us of the diversity of the Air Transport Auxiliary. In addition to Britain, they come from countries such as Australia, Austria, Belgium, Canada, China, Chile, Czechoslovakia, Denmark, Estonia, Ethiopia, France, Holland, India, Mauritius, New Zealand, Poland, Russia, and Spain, Sri Lanka, South Africa, Thailand, and United States of America. It's estimated that this diverse group would fly 150 different types of aircraft in its years of operation, often with little prior experience of the aircraft. And from 1939 to 1946, they undertook some 309,011 aircraft movements, all vital to the war effort. Evelyn also reminds us of the dangers involved in this role. 173 men and women who served in the ATA would be killed in the line of duty during the period 1939 to 45. Now, some items in the archive, even though they're small, also have an incredible story to tell. Now, this image is about the size of a postcard in reality. And this is an R101 memorial card, remembering those killed on the 5th of August 1930, when a rigid airship crashed just after 2 a.m. near Beauvais in France and immediately caught fire. The largest airship in the world was reduced to a skeleton of metal. This crash was during its maiden voyage to India, which had begun on the 4th of October 1930 at Cardington. This disaster stopped airship development in the United Kingdom. 54 men were on board the 101, only 6 of them survived. What strikes me with this object is the language used, and as you can probably read it, it says that key men, all the men there were burned to death. Those on board actually comprised 37 crew, 5 officers, 6 officials of the Royal Airship Works, and 6 passengers. Many of the crew were veterans of the First World War and had served either in the Royal Flying Corps or the Royal Naval Air Service. Those killed included the Secretary of State for Air, Lord Thompson, and Air Vice Marshal Sir Sefton Bracknell, on board in his role as Director of Civil Aviation, a post he'd held since 1922. Bracknell had been at the forefront of promoting aviation in the United Kingdom. The youngest crewman to die was galley boy Thomas William Megginson at the age of 18. The oldest was First Engineer William Rose Gent at the age of 53. Now, the funerals of these men was astonishing in its scale. And here we have an image of a paper that we've got in the archive, the Sunday Pictorial, showing some of the funeral. The coffins of the men were transported back from France and laid in state at Westminster Hall, I apologise. A funeral service took place at St Paul's Cathedral and attended by, among others, David Lloyd George and the Prince of Wales. Thousands lined the streets to pay their respects, and there's a Pathé News film that you can see online. Certainly search for it. It's amazing the scale of it. The coffins were then transported to Cardington, where the R101 was based, and laid in a mass grave where a memorial marks the spot today. I'm hoping to do more work on this funeral at a later date and look at the impact that it actually had on the nation. Of course, I also have some favourite aircraft. I would have been in the wrong place if I didn't. The museum holds 226 aircraft in its collection, and there is, of course, the stunning, breathtaking, when you first see it, Lancaster in our collection. And this is Avro Lancaster R5868, and this is a rare survivor of the Second World War and amongst the most significant aircraft in the RAF Museum's collection. Now, on average, a Lancaster's life expectancy was 21 operational sorties, yet this Lancaster flew a total of 137. It entered the RAF service in 1942, making a major contribution to Bomber Command's night offensive against Germany. As Q for Queenie, R5868 flew 68 sorties with number 83 Squadron before joining number 467 Squadron, Royal Australian Air Force, in September 1943 as S for Sugar. Flown by Pilot Officer T.N. Schofield, Sugar flew its 100th sortie in May 1944, prior to which Hermann Göring's boast that no enemy plane will fly over the Reich territory was inscribed on the side of the fuselage of the Lank. Now, another favourite aircraft of mine is this very colourful Fokker D7. It was one of the outstanding fighters of the First World War, designed to win back German air superiority. Hermann Göring was an early D7 ace. It was the only aircraft that the Allied powers actually included in the armistice agreement as war material that must be handed over. It was seen as that much of a threat. Built in 1918 in what is now part of Poland, this aircraft was left in Ostend by retreating Germans. The Belgian Air Force used it until about 1931, and the English collector Richard Nash acquired it in 1937. It's probably a composite airframe, and its paint scheme reminds us that this war, and particularly the First World War, was not one that was fought in black and white. Now, linked to this, we have an image of the beautiful tiny dog made of glass, which is on display in Hangar 2, along with a Fokker. This tiny dog belonged to Manfred von Richthofen, the Red Baron. He owned a Great Dane called Moritz, who he described as the most beautiful being in all creation, and he carried this mascot with him. Now, the mascot is actually on loan from the von Richthofen family. My favourite overall aircraft would have to be this one. This is the Handley Page Halifax W1048. Now, this is wreckage of one Halifax from an attack on the Tirpitz in April 1942, and it highlights the operations against this battleship, which I've written extensively on. It was involved in the attack, and it's my favourite aircraft as it starkly shows the fate of most aircraft from this period. Its unrestored condition I find particularly moving. Now, 5 of the 6 men of this particular Halifax evaded capture after landing on a frozen lake in Norway. The 6th actually become a prisoner of war, but is recovered from the lake in 1973. Here we have a picture of that happening. Now, to be honest, the next item I acquire or catalogue is my favourite item. It's a privilege and an honour to work with this collection and to make it available to the public, which is certainly a very important aspect of my job. People assume that archivists just want to keep the material to themselves. We're like dolems, for want of a better word, but that's wrong. We want the material to be accessed, to be activated, as I call it. Talking of making the archives available to the public, I will now highlight some of the resources that we have in the collection that I think may be of use to you and may be of particular interest to you as well. Now, our biggest and most varied section of the archive are personal papers. We have those belonging to, among others, Sir Arthur Harris, Lord Trenchard, Amy Johnson, who we can see here in a very informal pose, as well as those of ordinary servicemen and women. Now, the variety of papers also encompasses the whole range of war services and experiences. We're very keen to collect papers post-1945 also. We're interested in anyone who served in the RAF, not just the pilots. We also have intriguing papers, including some W.E. Johns Biggles manuscripts and the Battle of Britain signed film script by the cast and the crew. Now, we have an extensive collection of these Aircrew Log Books. These cover all aircrew trades, periods, and theatres, although the majority are from the 2 World Wars. These form a very useful resource for those researching the history of a particular unit, station, or aircraft, or an operation or a campaign. Many of the logbooks in our collection are originals, but we are also grateful to those who have allowed us to microfilm or photocopy logbooks in their possession. We welcome all offers to donate or lend logbooks, and are particularly keen to add material which relates to operations in the Middle and Far East, special duties, and of course post-1945. Now, we often get asked whether we hold a specific person's logbook. When aircrew were reported missing, their effects were collected together and held in a central depository. While in most cases their property was later handed over to the next of kin, unclaimed logbooks were retained by the Air Ministry. By all reports, by 1955, these unclaimed logbooks covered some 6,500 feet of shelving. It was decided that representative samples only would be preserved in the Public Record Office, and the remainder would be destroyed at the end of 1960. This decision was announced in the press, and a number of people did come forward and claim their relatives' logbooks. Sadly, however, the vast majority were destroyed. Now, we do have an extensive collection of First World War casualty cards. These relate to deaths, injuries, and illnesses suffered by the Royal Flying Corps and Royal Air Force personnel and ex-Royal Naval Air Service after the 1st of April 1918. And the collection can be searched online by the address given there. The records start at about 1915 and run up to approximately 1928. They cover all theatres of operations for that period, and these cards cover circumstances from off-duty sporting accidents to illnesses and death in combat. Now, these may be of particular interest to you. These are aircraft record cards. We hold a range of documents that we can use to help trace the history of specific RAF aircraft. We can provide these as copies for a small fee, depending on the quantity. Now, we have aircraft movement cards, and this was Air Ministry Form 78, which was used to record the allocation of an aircraft to units and the dates on which damage was sustained and repaired. Now, the surviving cards we have date from about 1930, They're held by the Ministry of Defence Air Historical Branch, but we do have copies of them on microfilm. While most of the cards are quite informative, those for aircraft sent to the Middle and Far East theatres during the Second World War are not. The majority of these simply record the aircraft's arrival at its destination and make no mention of what happened to it next. The movement cards usually do not include aircraft operated by the Royal Navy. We also have Air Ministry Form 1180, which was designed to record details of an aircraft's accident so that causes could be analysed and result in data used in accident prevention. The original cards, mainly dating from 1929 onwards, with some from 1919, are also held by the Air Historical Branch, and again we have microfilm copies. Now, to trace the specific accident, it's essential that you know the date and the aircraft type. That's the way these items are indexed. There's unfortunately no index for location, unit, or crew names, and it'd be brilliant if there was. We also have vehicle cards, and these are again quite popular with researchers who have bought a Land Rover in this instant and want to know more information on it. Now, the Royal Air Force has used many types of motor transport over the years. The museum has several thousand record cards for vehicles with registrations. And although the card gives details such as chassis number, they are filed by RAF registration number, and it's essential to quote that when you're requesting a copy. Now, interestingly, the RAF also went on the sea. We used marine craft from 1918 to 1986 for a large variety of purposes, including the support of flying boat operations, target towing, range safety, and of course, air-sea rescue. Now, we do have a series of cards relating to these, recording the allocation of RAF marine craft units. Probably the most requested material that we get, certainly I always get at least 4 or 5 a day when I'm duty curator, relate to site plans. The museum has over 2,000 site plans of airfields and non-flying stations in the United Kingdom and abroad. However, it's not possible to supply lists of the complete collection, but if you can let us know the site in which you're interested, we can certainly check our holdings. Copies of plans from our microfilm can be supplied electronically, but we are unable to supply plans of sites which are still in use by the services or the Ministry of Defence for obvious reasons. Now, by sheer coincidence, I decided to show a site plan for RAF North Luffingham, and I understand that some of you have been there in the past and flown models there. It's a site that was obviously a location for the Thor intermediate range ballistic missile, and one I visited last year. And as many of you know, when you go there, you feel like you're on the set of the 1970s episode of The Avengers. It's the unused golf course is quite bizarre. It's quite a lovely place to go to as well. Now, most of the buildings found on RAF stations were, until relatively recently, built to standard designs. And the museum has a large collection of drawings, and we do have a list. Some of which, however, were in poor condition when we received them, so unfortunately they can't be copied. And we have several bound volumes of these propaganda leaflets. These contain examples of leaflets dropped over Europe during the Second World War. Each volume covers a period of 1 or 2 months and includes a summary of the numbers dropped, as well as translations of each leaflet. We also have many unbound examples. A small number of leaflets are intended for use in other theatres. We also have a volume containing examples of leaflets produced by the War Office to be used in the First World War. These were intended to be distributed by aeroplane, balloon, and trench mortar. Further examples of propaganda can be used in more recent conflicts, such as the Malay emergency in Cyprus, can also be found in personal archive collections. Now, material which is often of a complex technical nature is made much more easier to understand with cartoons and images. And this is where our air diagrams collection comes in. Now, many graphic artists were employed by the Air Ministry and Ministry of Aircraft Productions, but the majority of them actually remain anonymous. A few did go on to become represented names in their field. Air diagrams are first produced during the First World War, but the bulk of the museum's collection, some 30,000, were issued between 1939 and 1970. Now, I mentioned the Air Transport Auxiliary, the ATA, before, and we do actually hold some several hundred personnel files relating to members of the ATA who served during the Second World War. The files covering men and women who served in ground trades as well as aircrew are only available to the next of kin. Here you can see part of Evelyn's file. Now, the archive collection also includes a number of ATA aircrew log books, as well as papers of a number of former members of the ATA. Now, we do also have extensive archives relating to the British aircraft industry and several companies relating to that. And these include Fairey, Supermarine, Handley Page, and smaller collections such as Graham White's, Avro, Hawker Siddeley, Sopwith Folland, de Havilland, and Blackburn in general. The papers cover all aspects of their business, and some collections actually include manufacturers' drawings as well. One final important collection to talk about are the 50,000 Supermarine drawings, together with related documentation, which mostly dates from the 1930s to the late 1940s. Although the collection is extensive, it is by no means complete, and we are aware that many drawings are missing. Some drawings may not represent the latest edition and therefore may not incorporate important modifications, which might affect the airworthiness of any aircraft built from or restored from them. Now, I'll just leave you with one final slide. And this is, of course, my email address and our inquiries email address. And the image that you can see is RAF Andover celebrating VE Day. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Gary, showing like all the range of resources that that RAF Museum have. I must admit that the archive was something that I wasn't too familiar with, but one of the best known scale modelers or RC scale modelers in the world, Pete McDermott, was the one that alerted me to it. He used to spend an awful lot of time there researching his Aircrew DH9As, which he built like about 4 of. But I'll hand over to my partner in crime quickly, Mike Smith. I've put him on the spot again. We're used to doing this now. But Mike, you as well have like first-hand experience of going to the archive, so perhaps you can extend to the others. But yeah, thanks again, Gary.
No problem.
Yes, indeed. It's some years ago now, but I built a free flight Sopwith Cuckoo, and not knowing much about it, I contacted the museum and was welcomed with open arms, and looked at original drawings and information well in excess of what I required for what I wanted. But myself and my son was there with me on the day, and it was most enjoyable and very informative, and wasn't that expensive either for a few copies of this, that, and the other.
Pretty reasonable.
It was very very good value. Well worth a visit. I recommend it. Yeah,
we're hoping to get back to having it open as soon as we can, really. I mean, obviously at the moment we can't, but hopefully if the timescale goes to plan, we'll be reopening probably in late June, I believe it is, that they're middle of June, I think it is, that they're looking at, with all museums and galleries opening. We're hoping to open the reading room soon after that.
Can I preempt question and answer time by saying that the burning question, everybody wants to know why they called them rhubarbs?
That's a good question. Apparently they first called them, from what I read, if I remember, they wanted to first call them mosquitoes, but then they realized it was going to be confusing with the actual aircraft of the same name. I'm still looking into that, why rhubarbs are rhubarbs.
I wondered if it might be an RAF expletive.
Yeah, it probably is. It's probably something like usually goes down to something like that. Yeah, I mean, there was a thing where the pilots that went on rhubarbs literally volunteered to go on them, and there was this rumor about, you've got to be a little bit insane to go on these things, you know, because you're flying over enemy territory, you're flying across to occupied France, you're only going in bad weather, and the whole idea being that it would stop you encountering enemy fighters, not taking into account the amount of flak you're going to go straight into. So this rhubarb is sort of a derogatory term as well. So it's quite an intriguing thing, actually.
Thank you. Back to you, Graham.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else got questions? You can.
Graham, sorry, I've put a question on my screen. That question I just asked on the chat, but I can't find a way of sending it.
It's
There's
just
nothing
if you just click on chat down at the bottom of the,
Yeah, it's open.
and then there'll be a bit, it says to everyone, you type the message and then just hit return and it should come through.
I'll try it again.
Yeah, there we go.
Oh, it has gone this
It's just
time.
come
Right.
through now.
Okay.
There we
Right.
go. And Andy's just tested as well.
Next.
Chris, I'm sure you've got a question. I'll come to you.
Mute.
There we go.
Sorry, were you saying I've got a question?
I'm saying I'm sure you've got a question. You've always got a question. So
I've got thousands of them, but I can't. I don't want to take up too much time. I mean, I haven't been to Hendon for several years, so one thing I need to do is to catch up. But I need, well, obviously the current restrictions have put the complete stop on it. But that last slide that Gary put up, which had his email address, can you put that back up so that I can copy it down, because I missed it.
Yeah.
what I'll do is if I can type it in the chat window. Or...
Yeah, no problem. Go for it.
Email address and the contact details, and then
once I actually, if you've got it to type quicker than me, probably.
Yeah.
The only other question
I
I
can
want to throw
again.
in now is, I mean, for years. Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem.
There we go.
Haines at Raf Museum.
And the archive itself, is that just based at Hendon then, Gary?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, we do have some in the stores at Stafford, I believe, but the majority of it is based at Raf Museum Hendon. Yeah. And the Stafford stores are mostly sort of other material apart from archives, although we do have a few bits and pieces there. I think there's a pair of Douglas Bader's artificial legs at Stafford as well, I've been told, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, no. The question I was asking was this policy on disposal, because I get the impression that things have been got rid of over the years, which apart from creating a lot of, shall we say, bad press, simply comes down, I suppose, and correct me if I'm wrong, to resources. In other words, you can't keep everything.
Well, your
talk, you mentioned the fact that back in the, I know there was a problem back in the 60s and 70s, that you destroyed a whole lot of stuff and just kept examples.
Yeah, well, I think it's quite interesting when you look at, if you manage to get a copy of Peter Elliott's work from the Royal Historical Journal, he looks into the whole thing about what aircraft we were going to keep and what aircraft we weren't going to keep. So that's something to look at. I mean, from looking at the disposals of aircraft today, what we try to do is if we have to move an aircraft for some reason, we tend to pass it on to another museum where it can be displayed or looked after. I mean, it's not something that obviously we take lightly. But yeah, you're also right. We can't, as you see from our stores in Stafford, we unfortunately can't display everything. It'd be great if we could, but the great thing is that we try and rotate. I mean, I'm working on at least two future exhibitions at the moment. So, you know, I hope we're always trying to do things. And with our Battle of Britain exhibition, we bought in specific aircraft from that. I think one of them was in stores as well for that one.
Yeah, the other thing, just quickly, I don't want to hog the whole thing. Your unit at Stafford, do you ever have open days there where you can admit the public?
I think we do occasionally. I'd need to check with my colleagues. I know with the Conservation Centre in Crosswood, we certainly do there, because I've been on a tour there myself, and that is certainly worth a visit. Yeah. But as for Stafford, I'd have to double check that. I think they may have done in the past, but I'm not 100% sure.
Only the Fleet Air Arm Museum down at Yeovilton, they've got a big storage hangar across the road.
Yeah.
very occasionally they open it up to members of the public.
Yeah.
That's like Aladdin's cave. So
Oh, yeah.
I can't imagine what Stafford is like.
No, exactly. Well, it's something that, I mean, if you drop me an email, I'll pass it on to my colleague at Stafford and see what they're doing either now or in the future. But yeah, I agree. I mean, it's even, I'm hoping to do some sort of behind the scenes trips to the RAF Museum Archive, hopefully next year sometime when we can get back to having groups of people and stuff. And it's definitely something that I know people like and are interested in coming along to.
Okay, well, when it looks like we're allowed to travel, I'll certainly do that. Thank you.
Oh, please do.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Thanks, Gary. Over to Ben Divisio.
Yeah, no, my question's quite a straightforward one. Does the RAF Museum hold any blueprints of foreign-built aircraft post-war? For example, a Hispano HA112 Bouchon.
That is something I'd have to look into. It's not one of the things that I have at the top of my head, but we'll see. I mean, most of our material relates to, we have post-war archives, post-war aircraft blueprints in the collection. Whether we've got that specific one or not, I'd have to have a look in our cataloguing records and let you know. But again, drop me an email and I can look into that for you.
Lovely, thanks.
No problem.
If not, maybe Mr. Simon there in Hoskirch in southern Germany, you might be able to help Ben with the Bouchon as well. I'll drop you a message, Harry. A.D. Hayward. Once you hit unmute, I can see you looking for unmute there.
Third attempt.
There we go.
Yeah,
Adrian.
just a question. I've got my father's old logbook from World War II, Coastal Command.
Oh, fantastic.
What's the sort of turnaround time for those if they're sending to be returned or scanned or whatever?
Yeah, they usually we would do these sort of things pretty quickly within a month or so, but obviously at the moment we're not in the museum that often. I mean, I haven't been in since October at the moment, so it's just a case of, you know, what I would do with all acquisitions that we're getting at the moment, we're saying thank you very much, we're interested, we'll contact you when we're back in the museum on a more regular basis. So with anything like that, if anybody's got anything, I would say drop me an email or drop our team an email, we acknowledge it, and then we'll be in touch when we're back in the museum on a more regular basis. Because the last thing we want to do is, you know, somebody sends us something via post and we're not actually there to do anything with it.
Yeah, because when I visited Hendon, I asked them when I was doing some research, and they said, "Oh yeah, take some of the details," and heard nothing back from them whether they wanted it or not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That was probably in the past, but yeah, no problem. Yeah, always drop me. You can always contact me directly. No problem with that.
Yeah, this was UK Coastal Command. Then he went on to Karachi and Maripur.
Oh, fantastic.
To do jump master with the Gurkhas.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, got around. Yeah.
Yeah, fair bit.
Gary, while you're on that subject, I've got here my father's logbooks.
Brilliant. That's fantastic.
Now that starts in 1937 because he came from Canada on a short service commission and then went on to Blenheim's and then back to Canada flying training. And I was born in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. So I've been sort of trying to figure out what to do, but this scanning thing, I think, gives you the best of both worlds, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we've got our own sort of obviously purpose-built scanner in the museum where we can handle delicate material, because obviously that's the one thing, you know, you can't just push a book down.
No, that's not a good idea.
No.
The only snag is I'm in New Zealand, and at the moment, of course, we're all locked up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, same here basically. But yeah, it's I think another way around it is to take digital photographs and do it that way. That would be a way of doing it. Well, yeah, because we can always sort of look into accepting your digital images in the collections. We do have a digital collection as well as obviously a physical collection.
Right. Okay. Okay, that's fine. Thank you for that.
That's okay.
Thanks, guys. The questions are coming in thick and fast now from all mediums. That's why I keep on looking as I get messages and things other than the chat window as well. So over to Colin Leafield, then we're going to John Minshall, then Andy Sefton, and then we'll click back to further down the list. So Colin, first of all.
Yeah, thanks, Graham, and thanks, Gary. That was really interesting and excellent. It really, really was. And it's quite a long time since I've been to Hendon. Long overdue to get back there. Although I get to Crosswood quite often, and of course it's quite easy from where I live, so it's an excuse to get out on my motorbike when I can, you know. But it's always fascinating to see this stuff. You know, you go there, you see things like the Kawasaki KO100, especially 410. You know, you wouldn't see them anywhere else. And research planes, I mean, the Supermarine 510 used to be at Crosswood. Not sure where that one's gone to. It's not there at the moment. And but I also know there's quite a lot of planes we don't see that are in store. And how many are there? What else have you got that you know, we'd love to see, and will we see them at any time? And the quick question was, did you not at one time, or do you still keep airplanes stored at Rawton in Wiltshire?
Oh, good question. As for the storage in Rawton, that I'm not sure about, but I can find out from a colleague of mine. And as for how many, I think we have the majority that we've got between our both sites are on display.
Rawton Rawton is the Science Museum.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it used to be, that was in the early days of when they went from Rawton back to the, when they went from there to us, to the RF Museum, Hendon or Cosford. Yeah, that's right. So that was where they were first based. That was definitely mentioned in Peter Elliott's article as well. Yeah, that's where I was getting that confusion from. But yeah, as for how many we have in store at the moment, I mean, I know the figure that I gave is the actual total that we have, and I believe that includes all the ones that are in store as well. But if you have a look at seeing how, if you've been to Hendon, as you said, you'll know how packed our hangars are, and Cosford as well. So I would say that we've got the majority on show.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you very much.
No problem.
John Minshall.
Hi, Gary. Thanks for that presentation. That was excellent. My question is just, I live fairly close to Cosford, and I go there on a reasonably regular basis. And on 2 or 3 occasions, I've gone specifically to photograph a particular type, and then found it's been moved into store and not come out for sort of 5 or 6 years or whatever. Yeah. Is there any way of finding out for a member of the general public of when the storage aircraft are going to be put back into the display in the museum? Is there any way you can sort of interrogate on a website, or just contact whoever?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with our website, but it's just recently undergone a change, and there's the collection's online now, which is expanding rapidly. And that has the aircraft, a lot of the aircraft on it, and the location of the aircraft. It's not got everything on it by all means, but that would be your first point of call. Have a look on that, and that will tell you the location of the aircraft. Another way of doing it is, if you're going to come to Hendon, for instance, contact the the inquiries team, and we do get emails from people saying we're coming to have a look at this aircraft, is it on display? And we can always answer that as well.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Me that's now not unmuting myself. Doing a slight switch around in question order here. So over to Paul Rich. And then just to prime the next person, we're going over to Greece after that, to George Papagiannis.
Okay.
Paul?
Thanks, Graham. Thanks, Gary. Absolutely excellent presentation. Really interesting, and not long enough. If I'm perfectly honest, I could listen to you all night. My question's a simple one, Gary. Are the archives, under normal circumstances, only open weekdays, or can we visit them at weekends?
At the moment, pre-pandemic, which is a thing I'm saying too much at the moment, pre-pandemic, we were open Wednesdays and Thursdays. We haven't got plans at the moment of opening of a weekend, but it's certainly something we're looking at in the future in terms of expanding our hours. It's one of the things we're aware of, that we're trying to be as accessible as possible. And as from somebody in a past job who used to work weekends, I know that it's sometimes more accessible for people to come in the weekend, but it's certainly something we're looking at.
Okay, Gary, great. It's not a problem. It's just I need to know if I've got to book time off work to come down to
Yeah, no problem. I mean, if anybody wanted to book an appointment, obviously, first of all, keep an eye on their website. As I've said, email me on the inquiries team in advance. If you're thinking of coming in, when we are back and running and taking appointments, it will be on our website as well. But feel free to sort of cut through that and contact me directly, and I'll be able to advise you and book you in whenever you want to come in.
Fantastic. Thanks, Gary. Really, really helpful.
Okay, we'll go to George now, but just before going there, just want to actually point out that tonight was a record attendance. We hit 80 tonight, and I'll email you a little bit later, Gary, with all the countries that are on, but there were 12 different countries represented as well.
Nice
but
yeah.
Over to George in Greece, a different George in Greece from normal. There we go. Oh, can't hear you, George. I can see you speaking, but can't hear you. No. If you want, type it and then I'll ask the question for you. So we'll go to, I'm not sure, it's just someone that's down as Michael.
Hi, yeah, Mike Campbell, that's me.
There we go.
Hi, yeah, thanks for giving me the opportunity to ask a question. I've been an aviation buff since as far back as I can remember. I spent a lot of my working life as an aerodynamicist. And one of my neighbors was a volunteer at the museum. So I wanted to, I have a really great interest in the role of the Caribbean aircrew from 1939 to 1945, and I was able to take my daughter to a wonderful display that the museum did. It must have been, is it 5 years ago?
Yeah, it must have been about 3.
Yeah, I was wondering if you've got any more material, and we're planning to do another one.
Yeah, we do have a lot of material. I mean, I don't know if you know, but a lot of that exhibition went online as well.
Right.
Yeah, so I mean, I can always send you the link to that.
Yeah, thank
we
you.
do have quite a lot of material relating to other bits and pieces, and I'd be happy to put you in touch with a curator of that exhibition if that's of interest to you as well.
Yes, that is.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, feel free to drop me an email and I can do that for you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
No problem at all.
Thanks, Michael. PJ, across to you, and then.
Yeah, I was just wondering about, I'm more interested in some of the unusual aircraft, more like, say, like the HP Gugnac and things like that. But I can never remember whether they're actually on the RAF Museum side or the Imperial War Museum side. And it would be really, it's difficult to actually find out sometimes who's got what aeroplane.
Yeah. Exactly. We do get confused every so often. Yeah, you'd be surprised. Yeah.
And it's the same as the drawings availability. Sometimes I've got them from, sometimes I've looked at them from RAF Museum, and they've got them there, even though you haven't actually got the aeroplane. The aeroplane's in the Imperial War Museum or the Science Museum collection.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we are definitely trying to address with our collections online by putting all our aircraft online, talking about them. And then people can go literally straight online and have a look and type in the aircraft, and you can see straight away that it's in our collection. But it is something that happens quite a lot. I've had inquiries in the past where somebody sends me quite a long email, and then right at the bottom they say, "Oh, it's great to contact the Imperial War Museum." Sorry. Yeah. So yeah, that does happen. But yeah, I think we are looking at that, and the way that we are addressing that is with our collections online, and that, you know, hopefully eventually every aircraft that we've got will be on that. You'll be able to get on that, search on that, and be able to see straight away what we've got.
Right, excellent. Thank you very much, Gary, for your talk.
No problem.
Great, thank you. Ian Lever, or Brian Lever, sorry. I'm getting confused because it says Sheila on your profile. There we go, Brian.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. My father served in 138 Squadron during the Second World War with the Special Operations, flying Lysander. And I wondered if you have any records on Special Operations during the Second World War.
We do. We certainly have some logbooks that from the pilots who flew and dropped SOE behind enemy lines, for instance. We've got some of them is on display on the museum, and I believe we've got some material in our personal collections as well, and personal papers. So yeah, we do have material related to SOE. Yeah.
Well, I can come and see you when you open then, Gary.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, there's going to be an orderly queue, obviously.
Yeah, thanks for your great presentation. I enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you.
Well, as Paul Antonisen knows, in Norway, I do very good aviation-related tours, don't I? Because Paul, I took along to Hendon when he was visiting, what was it, about 14, 15 months ago, and it was sort of the envy of a lot of the scale modelers as we went around various airfields. In fact, Dave Charles, that's on tonight as well, we met up with you there when you got reinvigorated about your Typhoon. There we go. There's a couple of bits of info there for Ben on his Bouchon. George Kandelakis, have you been given George Papagiannis's question? No.
I think he can speak now. I see he's unmuted.
There we go. Go for it.
Papagiannis, can you speak? Oh no, it has nothing to do with unmuting. He will type.
Okay, he's going to type. There we go. That's from Ben. There we go. That's that. There we go. And the rest is all just information going back and forward. So here we go. We're waiting with bated breath now, Mr. Papagiannis. I'm putting him under pressure.
Can I ask a quick question in the meantime?
Yeah, go for it, John.
You used to do guided tours around the museum at Hendon at one stage, you know, for specific groups of people. Will that be a thing you can come back to once we get out of this dreaded lockdown?
Yeah, certainly. We're certainly looking into ways we can do that. Doing group tours is one of the big things that we do, and it's very important to us. So we'll certainly be carrying that on once we're told we can do that again. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for the presentation. It was wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
There we go. So George has typed his question now. So he was looking for information in the de Havilland Vampire, and you were, well, just sort of surprised and very grateful for the fast responses that you got from the museum. A gentleman called Andrew Dennis.
Yep, Andrew would be pleased with a name check. I'll let him
know.
Oh,
there we go. There we go. He's famous.
Yeah, we are, I mean, as I mentioned, we are mostly working from home at the moment, and we are logging inquiries we can't answer, but we are definitely replying to everything that we can, and we're trying to do things as quick as we can as well. It's just as frustrating for us in the team as everybody else, I'm sure.
Okay, Gerard Brinks in Holland, over to you.
Hi, Gary.
Hi.
Hi. Well, again, thanks for your presentation. Very nice.
Thank you.
I was just wondering, do you also evaluate drawings or color profiles? For instance, when you made them from pictures or whatever, when you to be found, Is it possible to send them in for evaluation or accuracy?
We can have a look at them and give you some details about what they are and what they show and things like that. And we can't do valuations because that's museum policy. We can't do anything like that. But for instance, if you was to send in some images and say, I think this shows X, Y, and Z, we could have a look at that for you and, you know, pass them around the team. We have got a photographic curator as well, so that would it'd be able to look at that for you as well.
Okay, great, thanks.
No problem.
There we go. Back to Adrian again. Adrian always asks questions, shows his enthusiasm.
Yeah, just the other question there. If we want to get particular finicky detail on a certain aircraft, is there any means that we can arrange to get up close to that particular machine to walk around it and take photographs? Yeah,
I mean, sometimes we are allowed to do that. What you basically can do is speak to our visitor services team, and they're happy to arrange that for you and to look into that sort of thing. I mean, obviously, sometimes you can't because obviously conservation reasons, etc. But we try to be as accommodating as we can be.
Yeah, brilliant.
No problem.
Yeah, and thanks for the presentation. It's brilliant. Thank you.
That's okay, no problem.
There we go. George Papagiannis again, just saying that he's gathered some scan manuals. Just if is that of interest, it just send you the email and then you can evaluate from there.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got some scanned manuals, send us the details. I can pass it on to our librarian and we can see what we've got. As I said, with a lot of these things, you know, we tend not to take duplicates in the collection for obvious reasons. But you never know, there might be something comes up that we don't actually have in the collection. So it's always good. I always say, send us the details rather than don't send us the details.
There we go. And then Gwyn Avenel from New Zealand as well, just thanking you. But as it's obviously the morning time there, he has to go and earn some money before he finally retires. Then just for Michael Campbell as well, just there's a comment there from John Weeks that might be useful for you if you haven't noticed it. Thanks from Ben for the information as well, as I try and get to the bottom of all these here. And I think that's us on the questions. I think I've got everyone. I'll just scan through the screen to make sure that no one's waving profusely at me to say.
My cat's making a guest appearance. So.
sorry, can I just say,
yeah,
Gary,
there you go, John.
Yeah, it's nice to see another Stepney lad.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
yeah, I'm from Shadwell. So,
it's the accent gives it away.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Strangely, I'll go completely off topic, but when I first did my internship in London, it was Shadwell that I lived in.
Oh, brilliant.
There we go, because I was working in Canary Wharf. But I
Well,
was East London for a while, but I'm away from there now.
My family owned a pub there for 140 years. So
wow.
I've probably drunk in it at some point.
Yeah, you probably have, Gary. Yeah.
There we go. And John, that's just speaking now, is doing the presentation in 4 weeks' time on
fantastic
aviation within the Isle of Sheppey.
Oh, it's great.
There we go. And Andy Bowman.
Yes.
Yeah. There we go.
I should hate anyone to have the impression that the Zeppelin raids didn't extend as far north as Wigan. We had a Zeppelin raid over Wigan on the 12th of April 1918. The other one in Lancashire was in 1916 over Bolton on the 26th of September.
Yeah.
The one on Wigan was interesting because it highlights just how rudimentary the navigation must have been. The airship, the Zeppelin, was attempting to bomb Sheffield, and came over the coast at Withensea in Yorkshire, just north of Spurn Point, the Humber, and the commander Ehrlich noted that the British give away the position of the defended localities through the use of searchlights, and it's possible to find good attack targets despite poor orientation. And so it continued easterly, but underestimated the wind speed, passed about 4 miles south of Sheffield without seeing it, and ended up being attracted to Wigan by a blast furnace, which was in operation at the time, and was the top was open for reloading, and caught sight of the flares from that and headed for Wigan.
Wow, that's amazing.
In his report afterwards, he was determined to he claimed that he'd bombed Sheffield. He was nowhere near. So yes, very, very poor navigational abilities at the time.
In most of the coastal places that they hit, they were always aiming for London, but for somehow missed and hit the coast. I mean, Yarmouth got it as well. I mean, I've written, if you go onto the blog section of the website, I've written 3 blogs all about the airship raids, and they're quite intriguing, and about, you know, how with the first one, the London one, the way they found London in the end, as it was completely lit up. There was no idea of blackout or anything like that, you know, and because it flew so high, by the time the aircraft were basically scrambled to get there, it had gone, you know, and there was nothing they could do about it. Yeah.
Yeah, so thought that might be of interest.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, if I can just say that the bomber raids weren't that accurate either, because we had bombs dropped on Sitting Bull during the First World War, and they were aiming for the docks at Sheerness. We're about 8 miles away from them.
Right, yeah, I know, amazing. Yeah, it's when the biggest thing that I talk about in one of my blogs is when one of the Gotha bombs hit the school in Poplar, which is quite infamous.
Up North Street.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I went to George Green School in East India Dock Road, which is about 100 yards.
I was going to say, it's not that far from there.
No.
Yeah, exactly.
No, well, certainly Harold Simon that's on this evening, and my last trip to Germany, which was actually a year ago now, just before the first lockdown, and we went to the Dornier Museum with George Kandelakis that's on tonight, and the Zeppelin Museum's on the far side of the runway at Friedrichshafen. Is that right? I think that's what we said we were going to do next time we visited, or I visited.
Yeah, exactly. So the Dornier Museum is at the airfield outside of the town of Friedrichshafen, and the Zeppelin Museum itself, it's just next to the harbor.
Right.
And so whenever you come over, we need to cross the lake, because on the other side of the lake, on the Swiss side, there's a small airfield called Altenrhein, and that's full of history as well. And they have a really excellent museum over there, which is a kind of private museum, where they still operate some of the old aircraft in flying condition, like a couple of Hunters. And that's also a facility where they, at the moment, still build the Pilatus PC-9 military trainer aircraft. And so there's a lot of stuff to actually visit in this area. It's historic, absolutely historic. Yeah.
Well,
next time, there's a lot to see.
Definitely. Thanks, Harold.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, I think I've now covered everyone. I'll do another scan. George, we'll go to George Kandelakis because he's got a comment, and then over to Andy Sefton to round up instead of me tonight. Well, round up this part. George. Oh, you're still muted, George.
Oh, I'm sorry for that.
You did what I did.
I thought I clicked it correctly. Anyways, I visited the Hendon Museum 30 years ago in 1991 as a youngster, and was in a great hurry. It was my first longest trip to England for about a week, but I had to see a lot of things, and Hendon was running the list, and I was, okay, it's impossible to see anything in 4 or 5 hours. of what was available at the time. And I'm not even talking about archives. I wouldn't even dream of having the time to visit archives for a lot of things I would be searching. But I imagine now it is, with modern technology, much easier to send and receive information. Also via mail, I imagine, as well. It's in the plan for the far future, let's say.
Brilliant.
But I hope it opens quickly, soon enough,
Yeah.
for everybody and for you as well. I imagine it's not good
Yeah.
working from home.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah. The Raf Museum turned into my desk in my bedroom. It's not the same.
Anyway, thanks for the presentation, of course.
Thank you very much.
There we go. Just Dave Charles, you've just got in with a question there. If you want to unmute, there we go.
Yeah, I was just wondering whether the museum keeps an archive of in-flight pictures of RAF fighters during World War II.
Yeah, we do. We have a very comprehensive photographic collection, and we do have images of Royal Air Force fighters in flight. We even have surveillance images, for instance. We have everything relating to that. So yeah, we do have a photographic curator, and if you've got a particular interest in a particular aircraft, even in its a particular operation, we can have a look in our cataloguing for you.
That's just what I wanted to know. That's great.
Yeah. I think I know which aircraft you're looking for, Dave.
Yeah. Do I email you, or do I email the?
Yeah, if you want to email the Ask Collections team, and then they'll either forward it on or email it to me, and I can forward it on to our curator as well.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, no problem.
There we go. Thanks, Gary. And then Mr. Sefton.
I'm on.
You're on.
No.
There we go.
Yeah, Graham's asked me to summarise, and summarising this, how do I do it? Crikey. That was absolutely great, Gary. I think you're going to give yourself, from this, an awful lot of work.
Yes, okay, yeah, I was just thinking that.
I don't know if you're aware, but the editor of one of the better modelling magazines in the Western world is on this evening. Andrew Boddington, who is editor Aero Modeler. I have a very strong feeling there's something going to appear in the editorial in the next month.
Brilliant.
Which would be rather nice. But I think you're going to get yourself an awful lot of work, which is great for all of us. It's good for the museum, and it's also good for us. So what can I say? Thank you very much indeed. We've all thoroughly enjoyed it. You've got yourself a record audience for. We've been doing this for nearly 12 months now, and it's the biggest one so far. So well done. What I will do is ask everybody to give you a virtual clap. So that's absolutely brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's a pleasure to do it. And I'm sure at some point I may be joining you flying some models as well, because I think you've got me hooked a little bit as well.
That's brilliant. Really good to hear. We'll definitely keep in touch, and we'll invite you along to the various events.
Oh, please do. Yeah, I look forward to seeing John's in a few weeks' time. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, Gary. Just to sort of say to everyone, sort of general, sort of like sum up.
Just before you do, Graham, Bill Grimsley has just popped his thumb up.
I think it's just to say good. Well, I'm about to come to Bill anyway, because he's part of the group that's doing you're on in 2 weeks' time with Dave Tappan.
Yeah.
Do you want to say a little bit about it?
Well, first of all, I would like to say thanks to Gary for the lecture we've had today. It's been excellent.
Thank you.
I had a few things I wanted to say, but we'll sort of run out of time, and there was too many other people speaking. But next week, the next talk is about the IGMC, the International Jet Modelers Committee, and talking about jets. Model jets in general, and how the IGMC actually formed, and some of the differences between the jets, the rules for IGMC, and also F4C. So I'm looking forward to that with a little bit of intrepidation. There's a hell of an audience to speak to from all over the world. But yeah, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Okay, thanks, Bill. And then just the final thing, after that, we've of course got John at the end of March from that point, we will be going just to one a month on the last Wednesday of every month through to the end of September. That's partly to give Mike and I a chance to regroup a little bit, although we do actually have every session bar one booked until the end of November. So we're doing okay, but ordinarily it'd be sort of Northern Hemisphere like flying time, so that's why just going to one a month from the end of March. And that's it. Thank you everyone for joining. See you in 2 weeks' time.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
you.
Good night.
Thank you, Gary.
Good night.
Cheers all.
Thanks,
Thank
mate.
you, Gary. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye, everybody.
Good night, all.
Not all.
Night all.